Suga challenges the global music market, forcing BTS to confront a dangerous truth about fame, money, loyalty, and their future. Turn it off. The words cut through the conference room just as the enormous screen behind Suga flashed another wall of numbers. Revenue projections, global streams, brand partnerships, market shares, projected album sales. The figures glowed in cold white and blue against the dark room, climbing higher every few seconds as another slide appeared. Outside the glass windows, Seoul glittered beneath a restless summer night, thousands of headlights crawling through the streets like streams of molten silver. Inside, nobody moved. Suga sat at the end of the long black table with his arms folded, his expression unreadable. The presentation continued for another 3 seconds, then the screen went black. The sudden darkness seemed louder than the numbers had been. A man sitting across from him slowly lowered his tablet. "You asked for this meeting. Why shut it down now?" Suga looked at him. "Because none of those numbers answer the question." "What question?" Suga leaned back in his chair. "What happens when the world stops listening?" Silence. Somewhere behind the wall, an air conditioning unit clicked on. The executive smiled carefully, the kind of smile people used when they were trying not to reveal irritation. "The world isn't going to stop listening to BTS. That isn't what I asked. We're discussing expansion. I know. North America, Europe, Southeast Asia, Latin America, streaming partnerships, licensing, new distribution channels, global endorsements. We're not talking about something theoretical." "I know. Then what exactly is the problem?" Suga's fingers tapped once against the table. A quiet sound, almost nothing. But Jungkook, sitting several seats away, noticed it immediately. Suga only tapped his fingers like that when he was trying very hard not to say something. Jimin noticed too. So did RM. Jin shifted slightly in his chair. J-Hope looked from Suga to the executives and back again. Tae-hung remained unusually still. The room had been designed for confidence, floor-to-ceiling glass, polished stone, a table large enough to make everyone sitting around it feel important. Tonight, it felt like a courtroom. Suga finally spoke. "You keep using the word global like it means infinite." Nobody answered. "You say global market, global growth, global audience, global expansion." His voice remained calm. "But every time you say global, I hear another way of saying bigger." The executive's expression hardened. "Bigger isn't necessarily bad." "No." Suga looked toward the blank screen. "But bigger isn't necessarily better either." One of the senior managers exhaled impatiently. "We're talking about the most competitive period in the history of the industry. If you don't expand while you have the opportunity, someone else will." Suga turned his head. "Someone else?" "Yes." "Who?" The manager hesitated. "You know what I mean." "I don't." The man swallowed. "Other artists, other companies, other markets?" Suga gave a faint nod. "So that's it." "What?" "Fear." The word landed heavily. "You're afraid someone else will become bigger." Nobody moved. Suga's voice became quieter. "And you're trying to make us afraid too." The executive leaned forward. "This isn't fear, this is strategy. Strategy without a reason is just movement." RM finally spoke. "Maybe we should slow down." The executive looked at him. "Namjoon, with respect, slowing down isn't an option right now." RM's jaw tightened. Suga glanced toward him. There was no accusation in his eyes, only recognition. They had both heard that sentence too many times. Not an option. Another phrase that sounded harmless until it became a cage. The executive tapped his tablet. "We have offers on the table that most artists would spend their entire careers trying to receive." Suga nodded. "I know." "You know how many companies would kill for this kind of leverage?" Suga's eyes narrowed. "And how many artists would lose themselves trying to keep it?" The room became still again. Jungkook looked down. His hand had tightened around the edge of his chair. He hated meetings like this, not because he disliked business, because business meetings had a way of turning people into numbers, a voice, a face, a percentage, a contract, a projected value. He had spent years learning how to perform under lights bright enough to erase every imperfection, but nobody had taught him what to do when the lights went out. Suga pushed his chair back. "I need air." He stood. The executive was stunned. "We're not finished." Suga paused. "No." His eyes moved across the table. "We're not." Then he walked out. The door closed softly behind him. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Jin whispered, "That went well." J-Hope nearly laughed. It came out as a breath instead. RM rubbed his forehead. The executive stared at the closed door.
"Is he always this difficult?" Jimin's expression changed. "He isn't difficult." The executive looked at him. "He just doesn't agree with you." Jimin stood. "I think there's a difference." He followed Suga. Jungkook waited 3 seconds. Then he followed them too. "If we become so afraid of losing fame that we lose the reason people loved us, then what exactly did we win?" The question followed them into the elevator. Taeyoung watched them leave. Something in his chest tightened. He knew that look. Jungkook wasn't angry. He was worried. And when Jungkook became worried, he usually became quiet. Taeyoung stood. "I'll be back." Jin looked at him. "Where are you going?" "To make sure nobody starts a war without me." J-Hope smiled faintly. "That's probably already happening." Taeyoung left. The hallway outside the conference room was silent. The thick carpet swallowed footsteps. Soft, recessed lights stretched towards the elevators. Jungkook saw Suga at the far end. He wasn't going outside. He was standing beside a window. His forehead rested lightly against the glass. Soul burned beneath him. Jimin stood a few feet away. "You okay?" Suga didn't answer. Jimin waited. Then Suga said, "Do you ever feel like we're running because we're afraid to stop?" Jimin's expression softened. "Sometimes." "Why?" "Because stopping means hearing your own thoughts." Suga smiled faintly. "That sounds like something you would say." "I asked." "I know." Jungkook approached. Both men looked toward him. "What are you doing here?" Suga asked. "Making sure you don't disappear." Suga raised an eyebrow. "I was going downstairs." "That's not disappearing." "Depends how far downstairs I go." Jungkook smiled. For a moment, the tension loosened. Then Taeyoung appeared behind him. "I knew it." Suga looked at him. "Knew what?" "That you would all escape." Jimin laughed quietly. "Escape?" Taeyoung nodded. "From the global market." Suga's mouth twitched. "Terrifying place." Jungkook leaned against the wall. "What actually bothered you?" Suga looked out at the city again. "The presentation." "We know." "No." He turned around. "You don't." The 3 younger members fell silent. Suga rarely raised his voice. He didn't need to. When he spoke softly, people listened more carefully. "They showed us billions of dollars, millions of streams, engagement rates, market projections. They told us how many countries recognize our name." He looked at Jungkook. "And somehow nobody asked whether we're happy." Jungkook's smile disappeared. Taeyoung lowered his eyes. Jimin folded his arms. Suga continued. "They're measuring everything except the thing that made people care in the first place." "What thing?" Jungkook asked. Suga hesitated. "Us." The hallway seemed colder. Jimin looked at him. "Maybe they're just doing their job." "I know." "Then why are you so angry?" Suga looked at the floor. "Because I know how this story ends if we're not careful." Nobody interrupted. "I've watched artists become products," he said. "At first, everyone says it's temporary. Just one more album, one more tour, one more endorsement, one more interview, one more campaign. Then suddenly, the person doesn't know where the product ends and they begin." His voice softened. "I don't want that for us." Jungkook swallowed. "Do you think we're already there?" Suga looked at him. "No." The answer came immediately. "But I think we're close enough to see the road." Taeyoung leaned against the window. "And what happens if we don't take it?" "Take what?" "The road." Suga smiled sadly. "Then maybe someone else gets the numbers." Jimin asked, "And?" Suga shrugged. "And we get to keep ourselves." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then footsteps approached from the conference room. RM appeared. He looked tired, really tired. Management wants another meeting tomorrow. Suga sighed. Of course. RM looked at the four of them. They want us to review the proposal again. Jimin frowned. What proposal? RM hesitated. The new global partnership. Suga's eyes sharpened. What new partnership? RM looked at him. They didn't show you? No. RM slowly shook his head. They plan to present it after the numbers. Suga stared at him. What is it? RM didn't answer immediately. Jungkook straightened. Namjoon. RM lowered his voice. It's a restructuring proposal. The hallway suddenly felt too narrow. What kind of restructuring? Jimin asked. RM looked toward the conference room. They want more control over scheduling, releases, collaborations, overseas appearances, and individual activities. Taeyoung's expression changed. How much control? RM's silence answered before he did. A lot. Suga looked toward the elevator. That's why they needed the numbers. RM nodded. They wanted to show us how much we could lose by saying no. Suga laughed once. There was no humor in it. That's not strategy. No. What is it? RM looked at him. Pressure. The elevator doors opened. Nobody stepped inside. Suga stared at the glowing floor indicator. Then he said quietly, Fame isn't everything. Jungkook looked at him. Suga continued.
Nobody answered. That night, none of them slept well. At 2:17 a.m., Jungkook was still awake. His apartment was dark except for the city light leaking through the curtains. He sat on the floor beside his bed, phone in his hand. There were thousands of messages, news alerts, fan comments, industry headlines, rumors, analysts discussing BTS's next move. One headline caught his eye. BTS at the center of global market battle. He stared at it, then another. BTS expected to enter new multi-billion-dollar partnership. Another. Internal creative control could shift under new deal. Jungkook locked the screen. The room became dark again. He leaned his head against the mattress. A knock came at the door. He froze. Who? Me. Taeyoung. Jungkook opened the door. Taeyoung stood there holding 2 bottles of water. You're awake. So are you. Taeyoung handed him one. I brought evidence. Evidence? That we're both terrible at sleeping. Jungkook laughed quietly. Taeyoung stepped inside. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then Taeyoung sat on the floor. You're worried. Jungkook looked at him. You're not? I didn't say that. Jungkook twisted the bottle cap. What if Suga is right? About what? Everything. Taeyoung stared at the floor. That's a dangerous question. Why? Because Suga is usually right about the things nobody wants to hear. Jungkook smiled weakly. Then his expression fell. I don't want to spend the rest of my life chasing numbers. Taeyoung's eyes softened. You think that's possible? I don't know. Jungkook looked toward the window. That's what scares me. Taeyoung didn't tell him not to be scared. Instead, he sat closer. You know what scares me? Jungkook turned. Taeyoung hesitated. That someday we'll be so busy protecting BTS that we'll forget we're 7 people. Jungkook stared at him. Taeyoung smiled faintly. Don't tell Jin I said that. Why? He'll say he has been telling us that for years. Jungkook laughed. The sound was small, but real. Across the city, Suga sat alone in his studio. The room smelled faintly of coffee and old wood. A half-finished track played quietly through the speakers. He stopped it. Silence. He opened an old notebook. The pages were worn. Some had coffee stains. Some contained lyrics written years ago. One line had been underlined repeatedly. He stared at it, then wrote beneath it, "What happens when success becomes another form of fear?" He paused. His phone vibrated. RM. Sugar answered. Yeah? Are you awake? Obviously. RM sighed. I wanted to ask you something. What? Did you mean it? Suga leaned back. Mean what? Fame isn't everything. Suga looked toward the studio window. Seoul shimmered outside. Yeah. RM was silent. Then he asked, What is everything? Suga smiled faintly. I don't know. That isn't reassuring. I wasn't trying to reassure you. RM laughed softly. Fair. A pause. Then RM said, I think I'm scared too. Suga closed his eyes. Of what? Making the wrong decision. Suga's fingers rested on the notebook. There isn't always a right decision. I know. You just have to make one you can live with. RM breathed out slowly. Do you think the others understand what's happening? They're starting to. And you? Suga looked at the dark computer screen. I've understood for a while. Why didn't you say anything? Suga's jaw tightened. Because I didn't want to be the person who ruined everyone's excitement. RM went quiet. Suga continued. When the world finally starts opening doors for you, nobody wants to hear someone say, maybe don't walk through all of them. RM smiled sadly. You always were terrible at celebrations. I'm good at cake. You hate cake. Exactly. They both laughed. The sound faded quickly. Then RM said, Tomorrow won't be easy. I know. Can you stay calm? Suga looked at the notebook. No promises. The next morning arrived with heavy rain, the kind that turns Seoul's streets into mirrors. At 9 a.m., the 7 members gathered again. This time there were no cameras, no photographers, no polished presentation, only documents, pages of contracts, schedules, projected obligations, and a proposal that could alter the shape of their careers. The executives entered. Suga sat quietly. Jungkook's foot bounced beneath the table. Jimin noticed. He reached over and tapped Jungkook's shoe gently with his own. Stop. Jungkook looked at him. Jimin smiled. Breathe. Jungkook inhaled. Across from them, the chief executive opened the folder. We believe this structure will protect BTS's global position. Suga looked at the papers. Protected from what? Market volatility. Competition? Yes.
Suga nodded. So you want to protect us from being forgotten? That is one way to describe it. Suga looked around the table. What if being forgotten is part of being human? The executive frowned. I'm sorry? Nothing. Nothing lasts forever. That doesn't mean we should surrender growth. I didn't say surrender. Suga leaned forward. I said, remember. The executive folded his hands. Mr. Min, with respect, this proposal exists because the industry is changing. So are we. And that is precisely why structure is necessary. Suga glanced at RM. RM's eyes met his. A silent conversation passed between them. Then RM spoke. We need time. The executive shook his head. We've already given you time. No. RM's voice remained calm. You gave us a deadline. The room went silent. Jin leaned back. J-Hope stared at the documents. Taeyong's fingers stopped moving. Jimin looked toward Suga. The executive's expression tightened. This is a business matter. And we're part of the business, RM replied. Suga looked at him. Something changed in his expression. Not relief, respect. The executive closed the folder. Then perhaps you should consider what happens if the global market moves without you. Suga looked directly at him. Maybe it will. The executive raised an eyebrow. And you're comfortable with that? Suga took a breath. No. He looked at the other members. But I'm more uncomfortable with the idea that we have to become strangers to ourselves just to stay famous. Nobody spoke. The rain hit the windows harder. Suga's voice became softer. Fame isn't everything. He looked at Jungkook, then Jimin, Taeyong, J-Hope, Jin, finally RM.
We work too hard to become 7 people just to end up becoming 7 brands. Jin lowered his head. J-Hope's eyes glistened. Jimin pressed his lips together. Taeyong looked toward the window. Jungkook stared at Suga as if hearing something he had needed someone to say for years. RM closed the folder. We need to talk privately. The executive looked unhappy. This is not the time for emotional decisions. RM stood. Then perhaps you shouldn't have put 7 emotional human beings in a room and asked us to sign away parts of our lives. Nobody moved. The executive looked at him, then at Suga, then at the others. Finally, he stood. You have until the end of the week. The door closed behind the executives. The 7 remained. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Jin whispered, "Well." J-Hope looked at him. "What?" Jin shrugged. "I think we just made everything more complicated." Suga smiled. "Probably." Jimin looked at him. "Do you regret it?" Suga's smile disappeared. "No." Jungkook leaned forward. "Even if we lose something?" Suga looked at him. "We already lose something every time we pretend we're not afraid." Jungkook looked down, then slowly nodded. Taeyong stood and walked toward the window. The rain had softened. The city was still gray, but beyond the clouds, a thin line of sunlight had begun to appear. J-Hope joined him. Jin followed. Jimin stayed seated. RM opened the folder again. Suga looked at the pages. For the first time, they didn't look like threats. They looked like choices. Difficult choices. Expensive choices. Choices that could change everything. But choices nonetheless. Jimin broke the silence. "What happens now?" Suga looked at the others. "We talk." Jungkook smiled. "That's it?" Suga nodded. "For once, maybe that's enough." Nobody celebrated. Nobody cheered. There was no dramatic victory. Only 7 people sitting together in a quiet room while rainwater traced slow paths down the glass. Outside, the global market continued moving. Numbers rose. Numbers fell. Companies negotiated. Investors watched. Headlines waited. The world kept demanding something bigger. But inside that room, for the first time in a long time, the 7 members allowed themselves to sit without performing. Suga closed his notebook. He placed his hand over it. Then he looked at the others. "We don't have to decide who we're going to be today." Jungkook nodded. RM smiled faintly. Taeyong finally turned from the window. Jimin relaxed against his chair. J-Hope exhaled. Jin leaned back and closed his eyes. For several minutes they simply stayed there. 7 silhouettes against a rainy Seoul morning. 7 lives tangled together by music, friendship, ambition, fear, and a history none of them could erase. The world outside still wanted more. More songs, more records, more stages, more headlines, more numbers. But Suga had said the sentence none of them could forget. Fame wasn't everything. And perhaps for the first time, they were beginning to understand that choosing what mattered more did not mean they were abandoning their dream. It meant they were finally learning how to protect it.
The first thing Suga noticed when he entered the studio the following evening was that nobody was talking. 7 chairs surrounded the long table, 7 phones lay face down, and 7 untouched cups of coffee had already gone cold. But the silence between them felt heavier than anything they had discussed the previous day. RM stood beside the window with his arms folded, staring at Seoul as if the answer might be hidden somewhere among the towers and traffic below. Jin sat with one ankle resting on his knee, unusually still. J-Hope kept opening and closing a folder without reading a single page. Jimin had his hands clasped together beneath his chin. Taehyung was staring at the same sentence on a document for so long that Yoongi finally reached across and turned the paper upside down. "You've been reading it backward for 5 minutes, Yoongi said quietly. Taehyung blinked. "I know. Why? Because I don't want to understand it." Nobody laughed. Taehyung looked toward the center of the table. "Maybe if I keep looking at it, it will become less real." Suga pulled out a chair and sat down. "It won't." Taehyung looked at him. "I know. The door closed behind Suga and the sound seemed to signal the beginning of something none of them could postpone anymore. RM turned from the window. Everyone's here. Jin glanced around. Obviously. I mean everyone who needs to be here. Jin's expression sharpened. Who else did you expect? RM didn't answer immediately. That hesitation was enough. Jimin's eyes narrowed. Namjoon, RM looked at him. There are people outside this room who are involved. Management, J-Hope asked. Lawyers, both. Suga leaned back. So they know we're meeting. Yes. Do they know what we're discussing? Not everything. Yet, RM's jaw tightened. Probably. Jin dropped his foot from his knee. That's comforting. I didn't say it was. You just keep telling us things that make me want to throw this table through the window. J-Hope finally closed the folder. Can we stop pretending this is normal? Everyone looked at him. His voice was controlled, but his hands were shaking slightly. Yesterday we were told our future needed to be restructured. Today there are already articles saying we're divided. Jimin's expression changed. Articles? J-Hope nodded. Several. Jungkook immediately reached for his phone, but Suga stopped him. Don't. I need to see. No, you don't. Hyung, if you read every headline tonight, tomorrow you'll be fighting ghosts. Jungkook stared at him. What if they're not ghosts? Suga didn't answer. RM opened his laptop and turned it toward the others. They're not. The screen displayed several headlines. The first suggested BTS was facing internal conflict over the direction of its global expansion. Another claimed one member was resisting the proposed restructuring. Another speculated that the group could face a major division. Jimin's eyes moved from one headline to another. They don't know anything. That has never stopped anyone from writing, Jin muttered. Taehyung leaned closer. This one says someone inside the group wants to leave. Jungkook's head snapped up. What? Don't read it, Jimin said, but it was too late. Jungkook had already seen it. Who? Nobody answered. Who does it say wants to leave? RM closed the laptop. It doesn't name anyone. Then why would they write that? Because uncertainty gets clicks. Suga looked at RM. Or because someone leaked something. The room became still. What? J-Hope asked. Suga's eyes remained on RM. The proposal wasn't supposed to be public. RM nodded slowly. I know. Yet within 24 hours people are discussing specific details. Jin leaned forward. So someone talked. Maybe, RM said. Maybe the proposal was already circulating. That's not an answer. Because I don't have one. Jin stood abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor. Then find one. Jin, no, Jin's voice rose. I'm tired of being told we should stay calm while everyone outside this room knows something before we do. J-Hope stood too. Hyung, sit down. Why? Because shouting won't fix it. Jin stared at him. Neither will pretending we're fine. The words hung in the room. J-Hope's expression softened. I didn't say we're fine. Then say it. J-Hope swallowed. I'm scared. Jin's anger disappeared instantly. Of what? J-Hope looked toward the floor. That this is the beginning of the end. Nobody moved. I know we always say things change and we'll handle them, he continued. But this feels different. The numbers are bigger, the pressure is bigger, the people involved are bigger, and for the first time I don't know whether we're all walking in the same direction. Suga looked at him. We are. How do you know? Because we're here. That's not enough. It is for tonight. J-Hope shook his head. You always make things sound simple. Suga's eyes hardened. No, I make them sound survivable. The door opened. Everyone turned. A staff member stood outside, visibly nervous. I'm sorry to interrupt. RM's expression immediately changed. What happened? There's been a development. What kind? The staff member hesitated. The international partner has issued a statement. Suga stood. Already? Yes. About what? The staff member looked at RM. They're saying the negotiations are progressing positively. Jin laughed bitterly. Progressing positively. He repeated the words as if they tasted terrible. We haven't agreed to anything. I know. Then why are they saying that? The staff member lowered his eyes. Because they want the market to believe the deal is happening. Suga's face became expressionless. There it is. Jimin looked at him. What? The pressure. The staff member nodded. There's more. What? They've scheduled a major investor presentation for tomorrow morning. RM's face went pale. Without our approval, they say it's a preliminary announcement. Jin slammed his palm against the table. That's insane. Apparently they believe the market expects certainty. The market can expect whatever it wants. Jin turned toward the staff member. Tell them we didn't approve it. The staff member looked uncomfortable. I don't have authority to do that. Then who does? Silence. Exactly. Jin walked toward the door. J-Hope grabbed his arm. Where are you going? To find whoever does. Don't. Why not? Because this is bigger than one person. Jin turned toward him. Then maybe someone should start acting like it. Suga stood between them. Stop. Both men looked at him. We're not going to turn on each other. Jin's chest rose and fell heavily. I'm not turning on anyone. You're angry. Yes. So am I. Suga's voice dropped. But that's what they want. Jimin looked at him. Who? Anyone who benefits from us being divided. Nobody spoke. Suga pointed toward the laptop. Look at the headlines. Someone is already telling the world we're fighting. If we start fighting in here, they don't have to invent anything anymore. Jin slowly sat down. Then what do we do? Suga looked around the table. We find out who is speaking for us without our permission. RM nodded. I'll call legal. Not yet. RM looked at him. Why? Because if we call legal, the first thing they'll ask is whether we intend to reject the proposal. And we don't know yet. What do you want to know? Suga looked at the folder. What we're actually being asked to give up. Jungkook spoke quietly. And what we're getting. Everyone looked at him. He opened the proposal. We've spent all day talking about what they want. What do they offer? RM sat beside him. Money. How much? RM hesitated. A lot. That's not a number. Jungkook, I want the number. RM opened the financial section. Jungkook read it silently. His eyebrows rose. That's. Taehyung leaned over. What? Jungkook shook his head. It's enormous. Jin looked over his shoulder. How enormous? Jungkook showed him. Jin stared. That's ridiculous. J-Hope whistled under his breath. Jimin didn't look at the number. He looked at Suga. Would you sign it? Suga didn't answer. Hyung, no, you didn't even calculate your share. It doesn't matter. Jungkook looked up. It matters to me. Suga's expression softened. I know. Then don't dismiss it. I'm not. It sounds like you are. Suga leaned forward. Money matters, of course it does. We have families, staff, people who work with us, charities, future projects, stability. I'm not pretending money doesn't matter. Then why do you keep talking like it does? Because money is supposed to serve a life, not replace one. Jungkook stared at him. What if this money lets us stop worrying about money? Suga smiled faintly. Then ask what it costs. Jungkook's eyes dropped back to the contract. That's what I'm trying to understand. Jimin took the document from him. He turned several pages. There are clauses here about individual appearances. Yes, RM said. What does this mean? Jimin pointed. It says certain external activities require prior approval. That's normal, the legal consultant who had quietly entered the room said from the doorway. Everyone turned. I apologize for arriving unannounced. Suga's eyes narrowed. Who are you? I'm Daniel Park. I'm part of the advisory team. Jin looked at RM. You expecting him? RM shook his head. Daniel stepped inside. I was asked to clarify the proposal. Suga didn't invite him to sit. By whom? By the company, not by us. No, then you're not here for us. Daniel's expression tightened. I'm here because your decisions affect thousands of people. Suga stood. Then sit down. Daniel sat. Suga took the chair opposite him. Explain clause 17. Daniel opened the document. Which portion? Individual creative activities. Daniel glanced at it. That section ensures brand consistency. Meaning, external collaborations, solo releases, public statements, and certain appearances may require strategic approval. Strategic approval from whom? The partnership committee. Who sits on it? Daniel listed several names. None belong to BTS. Suga stared at him. So 7 people whose faces are on every advertisement are not on the committee that decides what they can do. That's not an accurate characterization. Then characterize it accurately. Daniel paused. The committee would coordinate decisions with your representatives. Not us. Through your representatives. Still not us. Daniel sighed. Mr. Min, the purpose is to protect the group. Again with protection. Suga leaned back. Why does protection always require control? Daniel's expression hardened. Because uncontrolled decisions can damage global value. There it is. Suga smiled without humor. Global value. Jungkook whispered, I hate that phrase. Daniel looked at him. You may not understand the complexities involved. Jungkook raised his head. I understand enough to know when someone is talking about me without talking to me. The room went silent. Jimin looked at Jungkook with something close to pride. Daniel turned back to the contract. Nobody is trying to silence you. Then why does this clause exist? Risk management. For whom? Daniel didn't answer. Suga did, not us. Daniel closed the folder. You're interpreting this emotionally. Suga's eyes sharpened. Of course I am. That's precisely why you need professional guidance. I'm a professional, in music, in my life too. Daniel leaned forward. You need to understand something. Fame is fragile. One wrong move can erase years of momentum. Suga smiled faintly. That's what everyone keeps telling us. Because it's true. Maybe. Suga folded his arms. But if the only way to protect fame is to surrender every meaningful decision, then what you're protecting isn't fame. Daniel stared at him. What is it? Suga answered quietly. A corporation's investment. The sentence hit harder than shouting. RM looked down. Jimin closed his eyes briefly. Jin whispered, exactly. Daniel stood. I think this conversation is no longer productive. Good, Suga said. Then we're finally making progress. Daniel left. The door closed. Jin exhaled. I wanted to throw him out myself. J-Hope looked at him. You would have made the headlines worse. I know. Then why were you smiling? Jin looked at him. Because I imagined it. For the first time that evening, everyone laughed. It was brief, but it broke something in the room. Then RM's phone vibrated. He looked at the screen and the smile disappeared. What? Jimin asked. RM didn't answer. He handed the phone to Suga. Suga read the message. His face changed. What is it? Yoongi asked. Suga placed the phone on the table. Someone leaked the full proposal. Nobody breathed. RM took the phone back. That's impossible. Apparently not. Jin leaned forward. Where? Several outlets. Who had access? RM looked around the room. Executives, legal, advisors, internal teams. Suga said, and us. We didn't leak it. Jin's voice was sharp. Obviously. Suga stared at the screen. Not obviously. Everyone looked at him. What do you mean? Jimin asked. If someone wants us to fight, the leak is useful. RM nodded slowly. They can frame the disagreement as internal rebellion, or one of us can be blamed. Yoongi looked up sharply. You think someone could leak it and make it look like one of us did? Yes. Why? Because people believe conflict more easily when they can put a face on it. Taehyung stood and walked to the window. Then they'll choose one of us. J-Hope's voice was quiet. Who? No one answered. The room seemed to contract. Every silence became suspicious. Every glance lasted too long. Yoongi looked at Jimin. Jimin looked at him. Jin looked at RM. RM looked at Suga. Suga saw it happening and immediately stood. Stop. Nobody said anything, RM replied. You don't have to. Suga looked at each of them. We're not doing this. Jin frowned. Doing what? Looking at each other like suspects. But someone did it. Yes. Then what? Then we investigate. Jimin nodded. Together. Exactly. Suga picked up the phone. And until we know who leaked it, nobody outside this room gets our trust. The words had barely left his mouth when his own phone vibrated. He looked down. Unknown number. One message. You should ask why one member wanted the deal rejected before the others ever saw it. Suga's expression went blank. Jimin noticed. What? Nothing. Hyung. Suga locked the phone. Nothing. Jimin stood. You're lying. Suga looked at him. I'm handling it. That's not the same thing. I know. Then show me. Suga hesitated. Yoongi stepped closer. What did they send you? Suga looked at all 6 members. For a moment he considered hiding it. He placed the phone on the table. Everyone read the message. Jin's face hardened. That's it. That's what they sent. RM looked troubled. Could be bait. Probably, Suga said. But why send it to you? Jimin asked. Because they want me angry. Or they want you blamed. Suga looked at him. Exactly. J-Hope sat down slowly. This is getting dangerous. Taehyung turned from the window. Maybe we should cancel everything. Yoongi looked at him. Everything. The partnership. The presentation. Schedule all of it. RM shook his head. We can't just disappear. Why not? Because millions of people are expecting us. Taehyung's voice rose. Millions of people aren't the ones sitting in this room. RM looked stunned. Taehyung continued. We're always thinking about what the audience expects, what the company expects, what the market expects, what advertisers expect, what analysts expect. When do we get to expect something from ourselves? Taehyung, RM said quietly. No. Taehyung's eyes glistened. I'm tired. The room went silent. I'm tired of hearing that we're lucky every time we're exhausted. I'm tired of being told that pressure means we're important. I'm tired of people saying we should be grateful when we're scared. Jimin stood and moved toward him. Taehyung wiped his face quickly. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. I shouldn't have said don't apologize. Jimin placed a hand on his shoulder. Taehyung looked away. I just don't want to lose us. Jimin's voice softened. Then don't. It's not that simple. I know. Everyone keeps saying we can handle it. Taehyung laughed through the emotion. What if we can't? Jimin squeezed his shoulder. Then we admit it. Suga watched them silently. Something inside him shifted. He realized the debate wasn't really about contracts. Not anymore. It was about fear. 7 different versions of it. Jin feared losing their freedom after years of earning it. J-Hope feared the group dissolving beneath the weight of success. Jimin feared watching someone suffer quietly and not noticing until it was too late. Taehyung feared becoming a stranger to himself. Jungkook feared waking up one day and discovering that every decision he had made belonged to someone else. RM feared choosing the wrong path for 6 people who trusted him. And Suga feared that he had spent his entire life fighting for music only to watch the business around it consume the people he loved. He stood, let's go. Everyone looked at him. Where? Jin asked. Home. What about the leak? Tomorrow. The presentation? Tomorrow. The deal? Tomorrow. Suga picked up his jacket. Tonight we stop being executives. He looked at them. Tonight we're just 7 idiots who need sleep. Jin smiled. Finally, something realistic. They left the studio together. Outside, the rain had stopped. The pavement reflected the city lights. They walked without security around them for several minutes, enjoying a rare stretch of anonymity. Nobody talked about contracts. Nobody talked about money. Jin complained about being hungry. J-Hope argued that he was always hungry. Taehyung insisted that food tasted better after midnight. Jungkook challenged him to prove it. Jimin laughed. RM listened. Suga walked slightly behind them, hands in his pockets. For a moment, he could almost forget the headlines. Almost. Then a black car passed slowly. Its windows were tinted. It stopped at the corner. Suga noticed. The car remained there for several seconds before driving away. He said nothing, not because he wasn't concerned, because he had learned that fear became more powerful when everyone heard it at once. Later that night, after the others had gone home, Suga returned to the studio. He turned on one small lamp. The room was quiet. He sat at the piano but didn't play. His phone remained on the table. The unknown number had sent another message. This time there was an attachment. Suga opened it. A photograph appeared. It showed a private meeting room from 3 days earlier. 3 executives sat around a table. On the table was a printed version of the partnership proposal. Suga zoomed in. One of the executives was someone he recognized. Not from management, not from legal. Someone who had publicly claimed to support BTS's creative independence for years. Suga's eyes narrowed. Beneath the photograph was a sentence. You are looking in the wrong direction. He stared at it. Then another message arrived. The person who leaked the proposal isn't trying to destroy BTS. Suga's fingers tightened around the phone. A third message appeared. They're trying to save it. He read the words twice. Then a final message arrived. Ask RM what happened 6 months ago. Suga froze. He put the phone down. For several seconds he stared at the wall. 6 months ago. He remembered RM becoming unusually quiet after a meeting. He remembered a conversation RM had refused to explain. He remembered Jimin asking if everything was okay and RM saying it was only business. He remembered Suga believing him. Slowly, Suga stood. He walked toward the window. Seoul was still awake. He could see headlights moving through the streets, people crossing intersections, neon signs reflected in puddles. Somewhere out there, the world was still arguing about BTS. Somewhere, analysts were calculating their value. Somewhere, executives were deciding what their future should look like. And somewhere, someone knew a secret from 6 months ago. Suga closed his eyes. He hated mysteries. He hated secrets even more. But what frightened him most was the possibility that RM had been carrying something alone because he believed protecting the others meant keeping them in the dark. Suga picked up his phone and called him. It rang once, twice, 3 times. RM answered, voice heavy with sleep. Yoongi, we need to talk. A pause. Now, yes. Another pause. What happened? Suga looked at the city. What happened 6 months ago? Silence. Not the silence of confusion. Silence of recognition. Suga's eyes opened. RM whispered, who told you? Suga didn't answer. RM breathed slowly. Where are you? Studio. I'll come. No. Why? Because if we're going to talk, I don't want you to prepare an answer. RM was silent. Just come. Okay, Suga hung up. He sat down again. 10 minutes later, the studio door opened. RM entered alone. His face looked exhausted. He closed the door behind him. Neither man spoke immediately. Suga pointed to the chair. Sat. What do you know? RM asked. Nothing. Then why ask? Because someone told me to ask you. RM's eyes changed. Someone. Suga placed the phone on the table. RM read the messages. His expression slowly hardened. This is bad. What happened 6 months ago? RM looked away. I can't tell you. Suga leaned forward. Why? Because it was supposed to protect you. That's exactly what everyone says when they're about to make a decision for someone else. RM closed his eyes. I know. Then tell me. Yoongi, tell me. RM opened his eyes. 6 months ago, the company received an offer. The partnership. No, Suga's expression changed. Then what? RM swallowed. A restructuring proposal smaller than this one, less aggressive. And they wanted one member to become the primary global representative. Suga stared at him. One member? RM nodded. Who? RM didn't answer. Who? You. Suga's face went completely still. Me? Yes. Why? Because they believed your credibility with producers, artists, and the international industry made you the safest choice. Suga laughed once. And you rejected it. I did. Without telling me. Yes. Why? RM's eyes filled with regret. Because I knew you'd accept it if you thought it would protect the others. Suga stared at him. You don't get to make that decision for me. I know. Do you? I do now. Suga stood and walked away. 6 months. He shook his head. 6 months you've been carrying this. I thought I was helping. You were trying to protect me. Yes. And instead you made me blind. RM looked down. I'm sorry, Suga turned. Did the others know? No, anyone, a few executives. And now, RM looked at the phone. Now someone wants you to know. Suga stared at him. Why? RM shook his head. I don't know. Suga walked back to the table. Maybe the leak wasn't meant to hurt us. Maybe. Maybe it was meant to force the truth into the room. RM looked at him. Then whoever did it knows more than we do. Suga nodded. And that's what worries me. RM's eyes dropped. There is something else. Suga's expression hardened. What? The original offer 6 months ago was rejected. Yes, but the person who made it didn't disappear. Suga waited. RM whispered. They became part of the new partnership committee. The studio fell silent. Suga looked at the contract on the table. And at RM. So someone who wanted control 6 months ago is now helping decide our future. Yes. And they knew I was offered a separate role. Yes. And now they're leaking information. Maybe, Suga slowly nodded. Then tomorrow isn't a negotiation. RM looked at him. What is it? Suga's eyes hardened. A confrontation. RM stood. Yoongi. No, Suga's voice remained calm. We've spent too long trying to be polite. He picked up the phone. Tomorrow we ask every question. And if they refuse, Suga looked at the dark window. Then we stop asking. RM stared at him. What do we do instead? Suga looked back at him. We decide for ourselves. Outside, the first light of dawn began to appear beyond the skyline. The night had passed without either man noticing. For once, neither cared. They had no victory, no signed agreement, no clear enemy, only a growing understanding that the fight ahead would be harder than either of them had expected. But when RM reached the door, Suga stopped him. Namjoon, RM turned. Yeah, don't carry things alone anymore. RM stared at him for a moment, then nodded. You either. Suga gave a small smile. Deal. RM left. Suga remained in the studio. He sat at the piano and finally placed his fingers on the keys. One note sounded, then another, soft, imperfect, human. He let the melody continue until the city outside became brighter, and for the first time since the crisis began, the silence inside the room no longer felt like fear. It felt like the beginning of an answer. Do you know what they're planning to announce about you at 9 this morning? RM asked. Suga stopped halfway through the doorway and turned around. The studio was still gray with dawn, the first pale sunlight barely touching the windows, but RM's face looked as though he had not slept for a week. About me? Suga asked. About all of us, RM corrected, but especially you. Suga slowly walked back into the room. Tell me. RM held up his phone. They're preparing a statement saying that you will take a larger strategic role in the international partnership. Suga stared at him. I never agreed to that. I know. Then why are they announcing it? Because they want the market to believe the decision has already been made. Suga's expression hardened. And what exactly is my role? RM swallowed. Global Creative Ambassador and Strategic Advisor. Suga gave a short, humorless laugh. That's impressive. It's a trap. I know. They'll frame it as an honor. I know. If you reject it publicly, they'll say you're rejecting the group's global future. Suga's eyes narrowed. And if I accept, they'll say the group has approved the restructuring. Suga stared at him for several seconds. So either way, they win. That's what it looks like. Suga walked toward the window. Then we don't play. We need the others. We'll get them. Some of them may not agree with you. Suga turned. That's okay. RM looked surprised. It is. Yes. Suga's voice was quiet. If they disagree with me, they should say it. That's what I want. RM lowered his phone. You're not afraid we'll split? Of course I am. Then why sound so calm? Suga looked toward the city. Because pretending we agree won't keep us together. He paused. Honesty might. The others arrived less than an hour later. Jin came first, carrying breakfast in a paper bag and looking irritated at the world. J-Hope arrived behind him, still wearing a cap pulled low over his eyes. Jimin entered quietly, followed by Taehyung, and Jungkook came last. He looked exhausted. His hair was still damp and he had dark circles beneath his eyes. Jin placed the food on the table. Nobody says anything until everyone eats. Suga raised an eyebrow. You're giving orders now? Yes. Why? Because I'm the oldest. Jin pointed toward the food. Eat. Jungkook almost smiled. Hyung, that's not how leadership works. It is when everyone is hungry. Brief moment the room felt normal. Then RM placed his phone on the table. We have a problem. Jin immediately stopped opening his food. Another one? Yes, Jimin sighed. Of course. RM turned the screen toward them. There's a statement being prepared. Jungkook read the first paragraph. His expression changed. Taehyung leaned closer. J-Hope frowned. Jin's face became increasingly angry as he read. What is this? A draft, RM said. Drafted by whom? The Partnership Committee. Why does it say Yoongi has accepted a strategic leadership position? Suga answered. Because they want people to believe I accepted. Jungkook looked at him. You didn't. No. Then why does it exist? Because someone wants the market to move before we do. Jimin took the phone. It says this role will ensure artistic continuity during the next phase of global expansion. He looked at Suga. That sounds like they're making you the face of the restructuring. Exactly. J-Hope's expression darkened. So if people hate the deal, they blame you, Suga nodded. And if they love it, they assume we agreed. Jin slammed his hand against the table. This is manipulation. Yes. Can we sue? RM sighed. We need evidence that they intended to publish it without approval. Jin stared at him. The draft isn't evidence. It's evidence of preparation, not necessarily authorization. That's ridiculous. It's legal reality. Jin looked at Suga. What are you going to do? Suga took a piece of food from the bag but didn't eat it. Nothing yet. Jungkook stared at him. Nothing. Not publicly. Hyung, they're using your name. I know. Then we can't just sit here. Suga looked at him. We won't. Jungkook waited. Then what? Suga turned toward RM. We go to the presentation. Jimin's eyes widened. All of us. All of us. J-Hope looked uneasy. They'll expect only representatives. Good. Jin smiled faintly. Let them be surprised. Taehyung finally spoke. And if they try to stop us, Suga looked at him. They won't. Taehyung frowned. How do you know? Because if they stop us, everyone will know they were hiding something. RM nodded slowly. He's right. Jimin placed the phone down. Then we need one rule. Everyone looked at him. Nobody goes in there alone. Suga nodded. Agreed. Jungkook said, and nobody signs anything. Jin added, and nobody lets them speak for us. J-Hope looked at all of them. And if they threaten us? Silence. Suga answered. Then we decide whether the threat is worth fearing. The room fell quiet again. At 8:30, the 7 members entered the headquarters through a private entrance. The lobby was crowded with executives, lawyers, assistants, and security personnel. Conversations stopped as they walked through. Several people immediately reached for their phones. Suga noticed. He hated the feeling of being watched when he wasn't performing. It made his shoulders tense. Jungkook walked beside him. You okay? Fine. You always say that. Because people keep asking. Jungkook smiled slightly. Maybe because you keep looking like you're about to fight a building. Suga glanced at him. The building started it. Jungkook laughed. Behind them, Jin muttered, I heard that. J-Hope whispered, he's been awake too long. They reached the conference room. The doors opened. The room was packed: investors, executives, lawyers, international representatives, public relations staff. Cameras were not supposed to be there, but 3 were positioned along the back wall. Suga stopped. "Why are there cameras?" An executive approached. "For documentation." "You didn't tell us." "It's standard." Suga looked at RM. RM shook his head. "It wasn't in the agreement." The executive smiled. "It doesn't need to be." Suga's expression became cold. "Then turn them off." "Mr. Min, turn them off." The executive hesitated. Jin stepped forward. "You heard him." "This isn't your meeting," Jin laughed. "It's our career." The executive looked uncomfortable. RM said quietly, "No cameras." After several tense seconds, the cameras were removed. Suga walked inside. He could feel every eye on him. Someone whispered his name. Another person whispered the word ambassador. Suga sat down. The presentation began. The first slide showed the BTS logo. The second showed global growth. The third showed projections. The fourth showed a map. The fifth showed the proposed restructuring. The presenter smiled. "This partnership represents a historic opportunity." Suga interrupted. "For whom?" The presenter froze. "For everyone involved." "That's vague." "For BTS, the company, investors, partners, and fans." Suga leaned back. "Then let's be specific." The presenter looked at the executives. "Perhaps we should proceed through the presentation first." "No," Suga's voice remained calm. "If you want us to approve something, we ask questions before you finish selling it." Someone at the far end of the table whispered, "This is unnecessary." Jin turned his head. "Then leave." The room went silent. The executive frowned. "Mr. Kim." "What?" Jin asked. "We are here because apparently everyone knows our future except us, so forgive me if I'm not interested in being polite." J-Hope looked down, hiding a smile. Jimin's eyes remained fixed on the presenter. The presenter continued nervously. "The strategic leadership component is designed to provide continuity." Suga said, "I didn't agree to lead anything." "Your representatives have been informed." "I am my representative." "We understood that your management would." "You understood incorrectly." The presenter glanced at the committee. One executive finally spoke. "This level of confrontation is not productive." Suga looked at him. "Neither is announcing a decision we didn't make." "Nobody announced anything yet." RM placed the phone on the table. "This draft says otherwise." The executive stared at it. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because confidential documents are involved." RM leaned forward. "Then perhaps we should discuss why a confidential document was leaked." The executive's expression changed, just slightly, but Suga saw it. So did Jimin. "Interesting," Suga murmured. The executive looked at him. "What's interesting?" "Your reaction." "I'm surprised." "No," Suga shook his head. "You were afraid." The executive laughed. "That's absurd." "Maybe." Suga leaned forward. "But you knew exactly which document he was referring to before he explained it." The room went silent. RM looked at Suga. Jin looked at the executive. Jimin's eyes narrowed. The executive's face hardened. "I've seen multiple versions." "Then tell us which version was leaked." The executive didn't answer. Suga smiled faintly. "Exactly." The meeting erupted into whispers. Several lawyers started speaking at once. Someone demanded a break. Another executive accused the members of turning a business meeting into an interrogation. Jin stood. "Because it is an interrogation." J-Hope grabbed his sleeve. "Sit." "I'm sitting." "You're standing." "I know." "Then sit." Jin reluctantly sat. The presenter tried to regain control. "We need to focus on the market implications." Suga looked at him. "No." "Why?" "Because the market isn't the problem." He pointed toward the contract. "This is." "The contract protects the group." "No." Suga's voice sharpened. "It protects the structure around the group." The executive leaned forward. "Without that structure, the group loses global stability." Suga laughed bitterly. "There it is again." "What?" "The threat." "It's not a threat. You keep telling us what happens if we say no." Suga's eyes moved around the room. "You call it market reality, you call it risk, you call it strategy, but every sentence means the same thing." He paused. "Do this or you lose what you have." Nobody spoke. "It's fear," he continued, "and you're trying to sell it to us as wisdom." One of the investors finally spoke. "Mr. Min, with respect, you are being emotional." Suga looked at him. "Yes." The investor blinked. And I'm allowed to be." "Not when billions of dollars are involved." "Especially then." The investor frowned. Why? Suga's answer came immediately. Because billions of dollars can make people forget that human beings are sitting on the other side of the table. The room became silent. Yoongi looked down, blinking rapidly. Taehyung stared at Suga. Jimin reached for Yoongi's hand beneath the table. The investor leaned back. You seem to think fame gives you immunity from the realities of business. No, Suga said. I think fame makes those realities more dangerous. Explain. Because everyone starts believing they own a piece of you. The words hung in the air. Your image, your schedule, your time, your relationships, your mistakes, your happiness. Eventually they think they own your silence too. The investor's expression hardened. Nobody owns you. Suga looked at the contract. Then remove the clauses that say they do. Nobody answered. Jimin suddenly spoke. I want to ask something. The room turned toward him. Why is there a clause requiring approval for individual creative activities? The legal advisor answered. Consistency. Consistency with what? The global strategy. What if my creative decision doesn't fit the strategy? Then it can be reviewed. By whom? The committee. Not me, your representative. Jimin's voice became colder. You're talking about my music. We're talking about the brand. Jimin's expression changed. That's exactly the problem. He stood. If you call my music a brand, you've already forgotten why the brand exists. The room became tense. Jimin's hands trembled, but he kept them at his sides. I understand contracts. I understand business. I understand that our decisions affect people, but there is a line. He pointed toward the document. That line is when someone who has never written a song at 3 in the morning decides whether the song is emotionally acceptable. Suga looked at him. Jimin's voice broke slightly. You can protect a schedule, you can protect a budget, you can protect a partnership, but you cannot protect someone's heart by putting a committee between them and their art. Nobody responded. Taehyung stood next. And what happens to the person? The executive looked at him. What do you mean? You keep talking about the artist like a business asset. Taehyung's voice was quiet. What happens when that asset is tired? We have wellness provisions. Taehyung laughed softly. Wellness provisions. He shook his head. You can schedule a therapist, you can schedule a day off, you can schedule a private room, but you can't schedule whether someone feels empty. The room became uncomfortable. Taehyung looked at the 7 of them. We are not machines. Presenter tried to interrupt. No one said you were. You don't have to say it. Taehyung looked directly at him. You just have to treat us like one. J-Hope stood slowly. I have a question too. He looked toward the committee. What happens if we say no? The executive answered carefully. We would have to reassess the partnership. Meaning, certain opportunities may no longer be available. Meaning, J-Hope pressed, tour, possibly. Distribution, possibly. Global campaigns, possibly. J-Hope nodded. So you admit there are consequences. There are always consequences. Then stop calling them opportunities. His voice cracked. At least be honest. The executive stared at him. You seem to believe we're trying to punish you. J-Hope's eyes flashed. I believe you're trying to make us afraid. Nobody spoke. Jin stood. And I'm afraid. Everyone looked at him. There, Jin said, happy. His eyes were wet. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of losing everything we built. I'm afraid of disappointing people. I'm afraid of getting older and realizing we made the wrong choices. I'm afraid of watching one of us leave because we couldn't figure this out. He looked toward the committee. But I'm more afraid of signing something because I was scared. His voice softened. I don't want the last chapter of our story to begin with us being too frightened to say no. Yoongi lowered his head. Tears fell silently onto his hands. Jimin squeezed them. RM watched all of them, his own eyes glistening. The room remained silent for several seconds. Then the executive at the end of the table stood. This is exactly why emotional decisions are dangerous. Suga looked at him. No, the man frowned. What? This is exactly why emotional decisions are necessary. That's irrational. Maybe, Suga stood, but every important decision we've made started with something emotional. He looked at the members, a dream, a friendship, a song, a promise. Then he looked back at the executives. You want to reduce all of that to market risk. He shook his head. We won't. The executive slammed his folder onto the table. And you need to understand that the market will not wait for your feelings. Suga's expression hardened. And we need to understand that our lives won't wait for your market. The room exploded. Voices rose from every direction. Lawyers demanded order. Executives accused the members of irresponsibility. Jin shouted back. J-Hope tried to calm him. Jimin argued with a legal advisor. Taehyung stood frozen. Jungkook covered his face. RM kept saying, one at a time, but nobody listened. Suga stood in the middle of the chaos watching the scene unfold. Then he heard a voice behind him. You were warned. He turned. It was the same executive from the photograph. The man leaned close enough that nobody else could hear. 6 months ago you were given a chance to help shape this. Suga's eyes narrowed. And I wasn't told. You weren't ready. Who decided that? The people who understand what comes next. Suga stared at him. You mean the people who want control? The man smiled. Control is what keeps empires alive. Suga leaned closer. Empires also collapse. The smile disappeared. Not if the right people are in charge. Who are the right people? The executive's eyes moved toward the other 6. The ones who know when to obey reality. Suga's jaw tight. Reality doesn't belong to you. We'll see. The man walked away. Suga watched him go. Something in his chest felt cold. He turned toward RM. It's him. RM understood immediately. The committee member. Suga nodded. He was involved 6 months ago. RM's expression changed. How do you know? He told me. What exactly? Enough. Before RM could ask further, the conference room doors opened. A journalist rushed inside. Security moved toward him, but the man shouted, Is it true that BTS is rejecting the global partnership? Everyone froze. Cameras appeared behind him. Someone had let the press in. The room erupted again. Who authorized this? RM shouted. Nobody answered. The journalist continued. Is Suga refusing the role offered to him? Another camera appeared. Are the members divided? Jungkook stood. No, the journalist turned toward him. Are you speaking for the group? Jungkook froze. Suga stepped between them. No, the journalist pointed toward him. Then who is? Suga looked at the 6 members. RM stepped beside him. Jimin followed. Taehyung, J-Hope, Jin, and Jungkook joined them. 7 people stood together. Suga faced the cameras. We speak for ourselves. Flashbulbs exploded. Questions flew from every direction. Are you rejecting the deal? Is the group fighting? Did Suga refuse leadership? Is BTS breaking apart? Who leaked the proposal? Will you continue as 7? Suga raised his hand. The room slowly quieted. We are not breaking apart. The sentence hit the room like thunder. Jungkook looked at him. Suga continued. We are trying to make sure that staying together doesn't require us to stop being ourselves. A reporter shouted, So you reject the partnership? Suga paused. We reject any agreement that asks us to surrender our voices. Another reporter asked, Does that mean you reject global expansion? Suga shook his head. No. Then what do you want? Suga looked at the 6 members beside him. A future where growth doesn't cost us our identity. The cameras kept flashing. A final question came from the back. Are you willing to risk BTS's global fame to achieve that? Suga looked directly toward the camera. His answer was quiet. If fame is the price of staying human, then yes. The room went completely silent. Jungkook's eyes filled with tears. Jimin reached for his shoulder. RM closed his eyes briefly. The statement had been made. There was no taking it back. Within minutes, the internet erupted. Headlines multiplied. Commentators argued. Investors reacted. Fans panicked. Some accused Suga of arrogance. Others praised him for speaking honestly. Some said BTS was collapsing. Others said the group had finally drawn a line. The market moved before noon. Stock prices fluctuated sharply. Analysts speculated about contracts. Television stations interrupted programming. Social media exploded. And in the center of it all, 7 people sat in a quiet room after the cameras were gone. Nobody spoke. Finally, Jungkook whispered, Did I just hear you say yes? Suga looked at him. Yes. To risking everything. No, Suga shook his head. To refusing to let fear make every decision. Jungkook wiped his eyes. I'm still scared. Me too. Jimin laughed softly through tears. At least you're honest. Jin looked around. We're in trouble. J-Hope nodded. Huge trouble. Taehyung sat down, but we're together. RM looked at them. That's what matters. A phone vibrated. Then another. Then another. Suga ignored his. Nobody answer. Jin laughed. For once I agree. They sat there as the noise outside grew louder. After several minutes, RM's phone vibrated again. He looked at it despite Suga's warning. His expression changed. What? Jimin asked. RM slowly raised his eyes. It's from the company. What do they want? RM read the message again. They've canceled the partnership presentation. Everyone exhaled. That's good, Jungkook said. RM shook his head. No. Why? Because they've also suspended all negotiations. Silence. And, Jin asked. RM swallowed. They've requested an emergency meeting with us tonight. Suga looked at him. About what? RM stared at the screen. They say it's about the future of BTS. Nobody spoke. Then Suga stood. Good. Jin looked at him. Good, Suga nodded. Now we know they're finally listening. Or they're preparing something worse, Jimin said. Suga looked toward the window. Probably both. Outside, the city continued moving as if nothing had happened. Cars crossed intersections. People carried coffee. Advertisements filled enormous screens. BTS songs played from stores and taxis and phones. Their fame remained intact for the moment, but the ground beneath it had shifted. And for the first time, Suga understood that the greatest danger was no longer whether the world would continue listening. The real question was whether the seven of them could keep listening to one another when the entire world began shouting at them. Later that evening, they met privately at an old rehearsal room they had used years earlier. There were no executives there, no lawyers, no cameras. Just 7 chairs, a scratched wooden floor, and the faint smell of dust and sweat embedded in the walls from countless rehearsals. Jin looked around and smiled sadly. Remember this place? J-Hope nodded. We used to fight over the air conditioner. We still do. You always wanted it colder, because you were always hot. That's because you danced like a maniac. You danced worse. Children, Jin muttered. They laughed. The laughter faded naturally. Jungkook sat on the floor. I miss this. Jimin sat beside him. Me too. Taehyung looked around. Maybe that's why they wanted us to come here. RM frowned. Who? I don't know. Taehyung smiled faintly. Maybe us. Suga sat against the wall. Maybe. Nobody had an answer. For the next several hours they talked, not as celebrities, not as executives, not as a global act. They talked about fear, money, family, music, aging, the possibility of failure, the possibility of success becoming something they no longer recognized. Jungkook admitted that he sometimes felt guilty for wanting personal freedom. Jimin admitted that he sometimes hid exhaustion because he didn't want the others to worry. Taehyung confessed that he had started questioning whether every decision he made was truly his. J-Hope admitted he was terrified of disappointing people. Jin admitted that getting older frightened him more than he usually said. RM admitted that leadership had become heavier than he ever imagined. Suga listened until everyone had spoken. Then Jin looked at him. Your turn, Suga frowned. What? You've been talking about everyone else's fear. Jin leaned forward. What's yours? Suga looked at the floor. He didn't answer immediately. Then he said that I'll be the reason we lose something. Nobody interrupted. I've spent my whole life trying to protect the music, he continued. But sometimes I wonder whether my anger protects it or destroys things around it. Jimin shook his head. You're not responsible for everything. I know, Suga smiled faintly. Knowing and believing are different. Jungkook looked at him. Then believe us. Suga's eyes met his. Jungkook continued, if we disagree with you, we'll tell you. If you're wrong, we'll tell you. If you're scared, we'll stay. Suga's expression softened. You really grew up. Jungkook smiled. Unfortunately, everyone laughed. Then RM stood. We need to make one decision tonight. Which one? Jimin asked. RM looked at the 7 of them. Do we continue together even if the market turns against us? Silence. The question was simple. The answer wasn't. One by one they looked at each other. Jin spoke first. Yes. J-Hope nodded. Yes. Jimin said yes. Taehyung whispered yes. Jungkook looked at Suga. Yes. RM looked at Suga. Suga nodded. Yes. No cameras recorded it. No executives heard it. No market analysts could calculate its value. It was simply 7 voices in an old rehearsal room saying the same word. Yes. Hours later they left the building together. The night air was cool. Seoul had finally become quiet. Suga stopped outside the entrance and looked up at the sky. Jungkook stood beside him. You okay? Yeah, really? Suga thought for a moment. No, Jungkook smiled. Good. Suga looked at him. Why is that good? Because now I know you're telling the truth. Suga laughed softly. You're getting annoying. Learned from you. They walked toward the others. Behind them, the old rehearsal room remained dark. The place where they had once dreamed about being heard by the world was now silent again. But the 7 of them carried something out of it that no contract could define. They did not know whether the market would punish them. They did not know whether the partnership would collapse. They did not know who had leaked the documents or why. They did not know whether the executive who had confronted Suga was planning another move. They knew only that they had chosen each other before choosing the numbers, and for that night it was enough. The city lights reflected in the wet pavement as they walked side by side, 7 shadows stretching beneath the street lamps. No one was performing. No one was pretending. No one was promising that everything would be easy. They simply kept walking together. The door slammed so hard that the glass in the conference room trembled, and Yoongi immediately turned towards Suga with a look of disbelief. They just canceled the partnership and threatened to freeze our activities in the same sentence. Suga didn't answer. He was staring at the message on RM's phone, his face unnaturally calm. "Read it again," Jimin said. RM swallowed. "They say the suspension is temporary pending an internal review, but they reserve the right to reconsider overseas schedules, promotional commitments, and distribution arrangements." Jin scoffed. "That's not an internal review, that's punishment." J-Hope looked at RM. "What exactly did they expect us to do after today?" RM's jaw tightened. "Back down." "And we didn't." "No," Suga finally looked up. "Which means they'll escalate." Taehyung folded his arms. "Then let them." Jimin looked at him. "You don't mean that." Taehyung's expression was hard. "I do. You're angry." "Of course I'm angry." He looked around the room. "They used Yoongi's name without permission, leaked our private documents, brought cameras into a meeting without telling us, and then acted shocked when we refused to cooperate. They're going to make us pay for that refusal," J-Hope said quietly. "I know." "Then why are you smiling?" Taehyung looked at him. "'Cause for the first time they're showing us what they actually think." Jin leaned back. "Which is?" "That they think we need them more than they need us." Suga's eyes moved toward him. "And do you think they're wrong?" Taehyung hesitated. "I don't know." "Good," Suga stood. "Because that's the question we need to answer." Yoongi frowned. "How?" Suga looked at the 7 of them. "By finding out what happens if we walk away." The words immediately changed the atmosphere. RM slowly raised his head. "Walk away from what?" "The partnership." "That's not the same as walking away from the company." "I know, Yoongi. I'm not suggesting we leave tonight." Suga's voice remained steady. "I'm saying we need to understand our alternatives." Jin nodded slowly. "That's fair." Jimin looked at RM. "Do we have alternatives?" RM didn't answer. That silence was enough. "Namjoon," Jimin pressed. RM looked exhausted. "Yes." Everyone stared at him. "There are always alternatives." "Why haven't we discussed them?" J-Hope asked. RM looked down. "Because I was hoping we wouldn't need them." Suga's expression tightened. "That's the problem." RM looked at him. "What? You keep protecting us from information." "I'm trying to protect the group. And I'm telling you that protection without transparency becomes another kind of control." RM flinched. "I know. Do you?" Suga asked. "Because 6 months ago you made a decision about my career without asking me. I apologized." "I know. Then what do you want from me?" Suga looked at him for a long moment. "I want you to stop carrying the entire future of 7 people on your back." RM's eyes became wet. "You think I want to?" "No." Suga's voice softened. "I think you don't know how to put it down." Nobody spoke. RM turned away and rubbed his eyes. "You have no idea how many nights I've sat there wondering whether one wrong sentence from me could destroy everything." Jin stood and walked toward him. "Then stop being alone." RM laughed bitterly. "That's easier said than done. We aren't asking you to solve everything." Jin put a hand on his shoulder. "We're asking you to let us help." RM nodded, but his face remained tense. Then the door opened again. Everyone turned. A security officer stood outside. "I'm sorry, but you need to leave the building." Jin's eyebrows rose. "All of us?" "Yes." "Why?" "The executive board has ordered the floor cleared." J-Hope stared at him. "You're serious?" "Yes." Suga picked up his jacket. "Let's go." The security officer looked relieved. But as they moved toward the elevator, another staff member rushed down the hallway. "Wait." Everyone stopped. She looked breathless. "The press is outside," Jin sighed. "Of course they are. They've been told the group has been suspended." Yoongi's face went pale. "Suspended? That's what they're reporting." RM immediately reached for his phone. "Who told them?" "We don't know." Suga looked toward the windows. Flashing lights were visible several floors below. "Already controlling the story." Jimin's expression hardened. Then we need to control our own, RM nodded. We can't make another statement without legal review. Suga looked at him. Why? Because anything we say can be used against us. Anything they say can be used against us too. That's why we need to be careful. Suga took a breath. Fine. He turned to the others. Nobody speaks individually. Yoongi nodded. Together. Together. They entered the elevator. The doors closed. Nobody spoke until they reached the underground parking area. Their vehicles were waiting. Security had created a path through the exit, but cameras were already outside the gates. As soon as the first vehicle moved, flashes exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Is BTS breaking up? Did Suga reject the partnership? Are you leaving the company? Is the group suspended? Who leaked the contract? Are the members fighting? The questions collided against the windows. Yoongi stared straight ahead. His hands were trembling. Taehyung reached across the seat and held his wrist. Don't look, Yoongi whispered. They're saying we're breaking up. Let them talk. What if people believe it? Some will. Then what? Taehyung looked at him. We keep living. In another car, Suga sat beside RM. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, RM said, they're going to turn this into a war. Suga looked out the window. It already is. No, RM shook his head. This is different. How? A war has sides. Suga looked at him. And this doesn't, RM hesitated. I'm not sure who the sides are anymore. Suga looked back toward the city. Neither am I. The convoy separated. Each member returned home under heavier security than usual. Suga entered his apartment and immediately noticed something wrong. A light was on in the hallway. He always turned it off before leaving. He stopped. His hand remained on the door handle. He listened. Nothing. He slowly entered. The apartment was empty. No broken locks, no obvious disturbance. He walked from room to room. Everything appeared normal. Then he reached his studio corner. His notebook was open. He hadn't left it open. He approached slowly. A page had been turned. Written beneath one of his old lyrics was a sentence in black ink. You should have listened 6 months ago. Suga froze. He touched the paper. The ink was fresh. His phone was already in his hand. He called security. Then RM answered immediately. What happened? Someone was in my apartment. Silence. Are you sure? Yes. Did they take anything? I don't know. Are you safe? Yes. I'm coming. Bring everyone. RM paused. Because this isn't just about me anymore. Within 30 minutes the others arrived. Security checked the apartment. No obvious theft, no damaged doors, no missing electronics. Nothing seemed disturbed except the notebook. Jimin stared at the message. This is intimidation. Jin's face darkened. Who has access to his place? Suga answered. Security, building management, staff. That's too many people. Exactly. Yoongi looked around. What if they were watching us? J-Hope frowned. Who? The people behind the partnership. RM shook his head. We don't know that. Yoongi looked at him. Then who do you think it is? RM had no answer. Taehyung walked toward the window. Maybe the person who leaked the documents. Suga looked at him. Why would they threaten me? Maybe they didn't. Someone entered my home. I know. Taehyung turned. But the message says you should have listened 6 months ago. Suga's eyes narrowed. Meaning, maybe they're warning you about something. Jin looked at him. Or trying to scare him. Both can be true. The room went quiet. Jimin walked toward Suga. What exactly happened 6 months ago? RM looked down. Suga glanced at him. Namjoon told me. Everyone turned toward RM. Told you what? Jin asked. RM took a breath. There was an offer for Yoongi to take a larger international role. What? Jimin looked shocked. Why didn't we know? RM shook his head. Because I rejected it. Jin stared. You rejected an offer on his behalf. Yes, why? Because it would have separated his responsibilities from the group. Suga interrupted. And because they wanted to use me as a bridge between the company and the global market. Jimin looked between them. So the current proposal is basically the same idea, only bigger. Yes, RM said. Taehyung frowned. Who made the original offer? RM looked at Suga. The same executive who's on the current committee. Everyone went silent. Yoongi whispered, then he planned this for 6 months. Suga didn't answer. Maybe longer, J-Hope said. Jin clenched his fists. Then why didn't you tell us? RM's voice cracked. Because I thought I could stop it. By yourself, Jin shouted. Yes, RM shouted back. The room froze. RM's chest rose and fell. Yes, by myself. Because every time something goes wrong, everyone looks at me. Every time a schedule changes, I get the call. Every time someone gets criticized, I wonder whether I should have seen it coming. I thought if I could handle this quietly, none of you would have to worry. Jin's anger faded. RM continued, tears beginning to form. I was wrong. Suga stepped closer. Yes, RM looked at him. I was wrong, Suga nodded, but you're not alone. RM wiped his face. I know. No, Suga put a hand on his shoulder. You need to know. The moment was interrupted by Yoongi's phone. He looked down. Got something. Everyone turned. What? Yoongi showed them a message from an unknown account. Stop trusting the person who claims to protect you. Jimin's face went pale. That's the same style. Maybe the same person, Suga said. What does it mean? Yoongi asked. Suga stared at the screen. I don't know. Another message appeared. The next meeting is not about the contract. Then another. It's about who controls the information. RM looked at Suga. Tomorrow's emergency meeting. Suga nodded. Exactly. J-Hope frowned. What does that mean? Suga looked around the room. Someone inside the organization is controlling what we know. And they're using information to move us. Jin's eyes narrowed. So the leak wasn't random. No. Then what is it? Suga answered quietly. A weapon. The next morning, the story exploded. News outlets reported that BTS had rejected a major global partnership and that internal disagreements had reached a critical stage. Some commentators claimed the group was preparing to renegotiate its entire structure. Others speculated about individual departures. One outlet published a story naming Suga as the central figure behind the conflict. Another claimed Yoongi was considering leaving. Another claimed Jimin and Taehyung were on opposite sides. Every rumor contradicted another. Yet together they created one impression. BTS was unstable. Their phones became impossible to use. Messages arrived every second. Friends called, staff members called, family members asked questions. Fans flooded social media with concern. The members agreed to stay offline. But by noon, one rumor became particularly dangerous. A fabricated document began circulating online, allegedly showing that one member had demanded a separate contract and threatened to leave if the group rejected the global partnership. The document looked authentic. It contained logos, signatures, legal language, and even an apparent internal reference number. Jimin stared at it in disbelief. That's fake. RM nodded. Yes. How can you tell? The reference number doesn't exist. Suga looked at the document, but someone had access to our templates. Jin's face hardened. Again. J-Hope whispered, this is getting worse. Yoongi looked sick. People believe it. Taehyung took his phone. Don't read comments. I already did. Why? Because they're talking about me. They'll stop. What if they don't? Taehyung looked at him. Then we keep going. Yoongi shook his head. You make it sound easy. No, Taehyung looked exhausted. I'm just refusing to let strangers decide what I feel. The emergency meeting began at 7 that evening. This time there were only executives, lawyers, the 7 members, and a security team. The same committee member from the previous meeting sat at the head of the table. He looked calm, too calm. Suga immediately noticed. You knew this was coming. The man looked at him. I expected emotions. You expected rumors too. The market is unpredictable. Don't hide behind the market. The man smiled. You're becoming increasingly hostile. You're becoming increasingly suspicious. RM interrupted. Let's focus. The committee member opened a folder. We have reviewed today's developments. Jin laughed. You mean the rumors you helped create? That's an accusation. Yes. Do you have evidence? Jin leaned forward. Do you? The man looked at him. Evidence of what? That you didn't leak the documents. Silence. The lawyer intervened. We should avoid unfounded accusations. Suga looked at him. Then let's establish facts. He placed several pages on the table. The leaked proposal contained a tracking code. The committee member's expression changed. RM looked at Suga. You found it. Legal found it. The lawyer stiffened. That's confidential. Everything is confidential until someone leaks it. Suga tapped the document. The tracking code identifies the distribution group. The committee member leaned forward, and Suga smiled. The document was sent to only 12 people. Yes. 7 members. Yes. 3 legal representatives. Yes. And 2 committee members. The man's face became unreadable, so Suga looked directly at him. You're one of them. Silence. The lawyer immediately objected. That doesn't prove anything. No, Suga said, but it gives us a starting point. The committee member leaned back. This is absurd, RM spoke. Then show us the access logs. I don't have them. You don't know why. Security handles them. Jimin looked at Suga. Convenient. The man glared at him. Be careful. Jimin's expression hardened. Don't threaten me. The man stood. I'm not. You are. Sit down. No, Jimin remained standing. You don't get to tell me when I can speak. The room became tense. Suga stood beside him. He's right. The committee member looked at both of them. You are making a serious mistake. Suga smiled faintly. That's what people say when they're losing control. The man slammed his hand onto the table. You think this is a game? No. Suga's voice was ice cold. I think it's our lives. RM stood. Enough. Everyone stopped. RM looked at the committee member. We want the access logs. You'll get them. Tonight. Impossible. Then tomorrow morning. We need time. You had 6 months. The committee member stared at him. RM continued. You had 6 months to prepare this structure. You had 6 months to decide what you wanted from us. You had 6 months to build a strategy around our future. So don't tell us you need more time to show us who had access to a document. The man's face tightened. You are all being manipulated. Suga's eyes narrowed. By whom? The man smiled. You tell me. The room fell silent. You think the leaks are helping you, he continued. They aren't. Suga stared at him. Then who benefits? The man leaned forward. That's what you should be asking. We are. Good. He stood. Then ask why someone wants BTS to reject this partnership. Suga's expression changed. Why? The man smiled. Because there are other players waiting. Everyone froze. What players? RM asked. The man shook his head. You don't know the market as well as you think you do. Suga stepped closer. Then educate us. There are companies that would love to replace this partnership, and they have been approaching people around you. Who? Ask your representatives. RM's face hardened. You're implying someone inside our team is negotiating behind our backs. I'm saying you should look closer. Jimin looked at RM. RM shook his head. Nobody has authority to negotiate for us without approval. Are you sure? The question landed heavily. Yoongi looked at the others. What does that mean? The committee member picked up his folder. It means your problem is not the contract. He looked at Suga. It's trust. He walked out. The door closed. Nobody moved. Finally, Jin whispered, I hate him. J-Hope nodded. Same. Jimin looked at RM. Do you know who he's talking about? No. Are you sure? RM looked wounded. Yes. Suga picked up his phone. We need to check everything. Yoongi frowned. Everything? Schedules, emails, representatives, external meetings, communications. Jimin looked at him. You think someone has been negotiating behind us? I don't know, but you think it's possible? Yes. Taehyung looked toward the door. Then we're not fighting one enemy. Suga nodded. Maybe not. Jin sighed. This keeps getting better. Suddenly RM's phone rang. He answered. His face changed after only a few seconds. What? Everyone watched him. Say that again. He listened. Then his eyes slowly moved toward Suga. Where? A pause. Don't touch anything. I'm coming. He hung up. What happened? J-Hope asked. RM looked at Suga. Someone accessed your studio. Suga's expression went cold. Again, this time they left something. What? RM hesitated. A hard drive. Nobody spoke. Where? Under your piano. Suga immediately stood. Let's go. Security is already there. Then we go. They rushed to the studio. The security team had sealed the room. On the floor beneath the piano sat a small black hard drive. No fingerprints, no obvious markings. Suga stared at it. Don't touch it. A technician carefully collected it. We'll inspect it in isolation. Jin looked at Suga. Do you think this is the leak? Maybe. Or a trap? Maybe. Hours later, the hard drive was opened. It contained hundreds of files, contracts, emails, internal schedules, private recordings, financial projections, communications between executives, but one folder stood out. It was labeled with a date 6 months earlier. RM's face went pale. Suga opened it. Inside was a recording, audio only, a meeting 6 months ago. Suga heard his own name, then RM's voice, then the voice of the committee member. If we make Yoongi the international bridge, we can isolate creative negotiations from the rest of the group. Suga's face hardened. RM closed his eyes. The recording continued. Once the structure is established, the others will gradually accept it. Jimin whispered, they plan to separate you. Another voice spoke. What if Yoongi refuses? The committee member answered. Then we create a situation where refusing becomes too expensive. The room went silent. Yoongi covered his mouth. Jin's eyes filled with rage. They planned this. The recording continued. And Namjoon, someone asked, he'll resist. Then pressure him through responsibility. RM looked like someone had punched him. Suga stared at him. They knew. RM whispered, I didn't know about this part. The recording continued. Eventually, they'll believe the decision is theirs. Then another voice said something that made everyone freeze. What about the members? The committee member replied, they don't need to know until the structure is unavoidable. The recording ended. Nobody moved. Suga stared at the screen, then he looked at RM. You were right. RM looked at him. About what? Someone was trying to control the information. Jimin whispered, but who leaked this? Suga shook his head. That's the question. The hard drive contained one final file, a video. The screen showed a dark room. A person sat with their face hidden. Their voice was distorted. If you're watching this, then they have already tried to convince you that the problem is each other. Suga leaned forward. Who are you? The figure continued. I am not your enemy. The voice paused. But I am not your friend either. Jungkook's eyes widened. What? The figure continued. I am someone who knows what happens when artists trust institutions more than they trust themselves. The screen went black. Then one sentence appeared. Ask who approved the first proposal 6 months ago. RM's face drained of color. I know who. Everyone turned toward him. Who? RM whispered a name. The room fell completely silent. Suga stared at him. That's impossible. RM shook his head. No. Why? Because that person has been advising us for years. Jimin's expression changed. Who? RM looked at the 6 members. Someone we've all trusted. Nobody breathed. Then the lights in the studio suddenly went out. The room disappeared into darkness. Jungkook grabbed Jimin's arm. Jin swore under his breath. Security shouted. A door slammed somewhere in the hallway. Then emergency lights flickered on. The hard drive was gone. Everyone froze. Suga looked at the empty table. Nobody moved. Security rushed through the room. The technician who had been handling the drive was gone. So was one laptop. RM looked horrified. How? Suga stared at the doorway. Someone knew exactly where it was. J-Hope whispered, so they were watching us. Suga nodded. Yes. Jimin looked around the room. Then the person who leaked the documents knows we're investigating. Taehyung swallowed. And now they know we know. Suga looked at the others. Fear was visible on every face. But beneath it, something else was forming, determination. Suga turned toward RM. You said you knew who approved the first proposal. RM nodded slowly. Yes. Tell us. RM hesitated. I need to be sure. No. Suga stepped closer. We've had enough secrets. RM closed his eyes. Then he whispered the name. The others stared at him in disbelief. Jungkook's voice came out barely above a whisper. No. Jimin shook his head. That can't be. Jin looked furious. You're saying they did this? RM nodded. I think so. Suga stared at the door. Then tomorrow we stop defending ourselves. J-Hope asked, what do we do? Suga looked at the 6 members. We expose everything. Nobody celebrated. Nobody smiled. The decision felt heavier than any contract. But when they walked out of the studio that night, they walked together. The rain had returned. It fell softly over the city, washing the pavement clean while the 7 of them moved beneath a single row of umbrellas. They still didn't know who the anonymous whistleblower was. They didn't know how many people were involved. They didn't know what the next morning would bring. But they knew one thing now. The fight was no longer about fame. It was about who had the right to decide what their future meant. And for the first time, they were ready to demand that answer themselves.